Hey guys, and welcome into the no, we're not in the Wells Tech garage. As you guys can tell, things are looking a little bit different tonight. We're actually here in the Mike Becker garage. This is my garage at my house. There's a couple reasons why I'm here. Well, first of all, I do have about the same capabilities here at home as I do at work. Unfortunately, I don't have a hoist sitting here, and I don't have soundproofing or anything on the walls like the studio at work. So I might have a little bit more echo and that stuff going on tonight. But nevertheless, I can fix cars here. The reason why we're here tonight instead of in the Wells Tech garage is because the fact that we are a training facility as well as a manufacturing facility, and we have these environmental certifications that we need to uphold, and we're not allowed to work on vehicles that could have an impact on the environment. So if we were to leak coolant or oil, it would get into our drain system and could potentially cause issues for that. And also, I cannot tie up a hoist or a bay at work in case an engineer would need to be testing a part on something. So that being said, this is where the R&R magic happens. This is where if we're taking something apart, if I'm snapping pictures of something out on social media, this is typically where those pictures come from, like that broken axle shaft on that Honda that I shared. You know, things like that. That's all coming from here. That's what I like to do in my spare time. All right, you know, just because I'm a trainer doesn't mean I don't like to still get my hands dirty. So now today we're gonna be ripping this thing apart. You know, I have the procedure here in front of me, but all 26 pages or whatever of the service procedure for this. But you know what? Like most of you, I'm not going to follow the procedure just because I'm going to use experience and that kind of thing instead. That being said, this is my first time doing a timing chain job on a 4-liter Toyota. So there might be some things that I overlook or miss, and it might create some frustration or let's call them learning experiences for you guys and myself. So I'm not going to roll the camera through the entire removal process here, getting the chains off and that kind of thing. I'm gonna try to keep it rolling, but I will probably speed it up in the editing afterwards. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys the key points as well as just try and have you guys follow along in a fast manner. The book time on this is over 10 hours worth of labor. I'm not going to make a 10-hour video here, okay? We're going to try and speed things up. And the main goal here is just to really get into the behind the front cover, figure out what's going on with our chain. We already know that our timing is off, so we're going to figure out what's going on with the chain, and then we're going to fix it. And then afterwards, we're going to take it back to Wells. We're going to hook up all the lab scope equipment, and we're going to verify the repair. Okay, so the main goal of this is just to show you guys what this is all about and proving, I guess, that we were right all along in our diagnosis, okay? So with that being said, I think I'm going to grab a jack and jack stands. We'll jack this thing up. Oh, one more thing. According to the service procedure in here, step 2 is remove front differential carrier assembly, which is the front diff, and somewhere down the line here shortly after that is removal of the oil pan. Now in my research, I found that according to other technicians out there that have fixed these things, they say you do not need to remove the front diff or the oil pan to do this job. It reminds me kind of some other front cover jobs that I've done where they say you're supposed to, but if you clean everything off and seal it up well, you really don't need to. So that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to avoid pulling the front differential and the oil pan. That should save us a ton of time on this job. So I'm going to get a jack stand or a jack and stands. I'm going to get this thing up in the air, and I'm going to start draining out our oil and our coolant, and then we'll dig in under the hood. I also am going to be recording my time that I put into this thing just because I'm curious to see if I can beat the book on this. So let me know what you guys who've done this job before, let me know what you think, if you've beat the book or if this job has kicked your butt, and we'll see what happens to me, all right? So, all right, I'll be right back. We'll have this thing up in the air and have the oil and coolant draining. Hang on. Okay, so as you guys can probably hear, the coolant's draining out of this thing. I've already drained the oil, and I put the vehicle back on the ground. Because this is a pretty high sitting vehicle, I didn't want to have to be, you know, reaching up and over the entire time. Also behind me, you guys can see my other camera set up. Unfortunately, this is going to be the only other shot that we have for this disassembly. It's going to be under the hood like this. Now, normally we would have the over my shoulder shot, but I wasn't able to bring the entire overhead jib home, unfortunately. Now, when we get into points where we got to get some close-ups and stuff, I'll bring you guys in, and that's right where I'm at right now. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pull off this upper radiator hose, and I found a small cover that sits on the front cover of this engine. Now, I knew it was there, I had seen it when I first started working on this thing, but I didn't want to talk about it because I didn't want to offer you guys up any sort of silver bullet, quick fix type of thing on this 4-liter because I wanted this to all remain very generic up until this point. So now I feel like we can talk about this thing. So I'm going to get this upper radiator hose out of the way, and I'll show you guys what sits behind this front cover. For those of you who already know, it is the timing chain tensioner sitting right behind this cover. Now, what I found interesting was the way this thing looked. All right, so get this hose up and out of the way. We'll kind of just tuck it over here by the washer fluid reservoir for now. I'm gonna go ahead and pull that off in just a few minutes. All right, I'm gonna bring you guys over and hopefully not make anybody sick in the process. Down here, I have a mirror. There we go. There's our front cover, our hole in our front cover. And if we go ahead and zoom in on that, so you can see the piston or the output part of the tensioner as being very shiny towards the end there, and kind of more of a darker metallic color where it's been sitting its entire life. This right here leads me to believe that this tensioner has moved. Time to just dig in and see what we have. So here we go. All right, so a little bit of brake clean on a rag, and I'm just gonna go ahead and wipe down the surface of the lower intake manifold right here. And my goal here is to try and get all the junk off of here, and I'm gonna tape this thing shut. Just in case I drop the ever so dreaded 10mm socket and it doesn't fall down into the engine, okay? I don't want anything falling into this engine. So what I use, roll of painter's tape. If you work at a dealership with a body shop or something, or a shop with a body shop, this stuff is usually flying around. They usually get rid of it with like a quarter of the roll left or something. So see if you can snag it. This stuff works great because it doesn't leave any sort of residue on the lower intake manifold. But what I want to do is I just want to tape this lower intake up so that I have no possibility of anything ever falling into our cylinder heads, okay? This would be for around our water pump. And I want to point out something right here, guys. I don't know if you'll be able to see. Yeah, you can see that right here. See that pink kind of crusties here? See that pink crusties right there? That's coming out of the weep hole of the water pump, okay? This is step 1 of potential failure, okay? So this thing is on its way out. So, since we're gonna be in here anyway, it's time that this thing gets a water pump. I think I'm going to let the garage air out a bit and get back at this in the morning. All right, I'm back. It's a new day, the sun is shining. I've enlisted a little bit of extra help today. As you guys can see, I'm joined here by my buddy. I don't know how much help he's gonna actually be, but he's out here hanging out in the garage. That's Jordy. Say hi, Jordy. All right, he doesn't seem to care. So let's get right back into it. Now, I decided that I want to actually pull the radiator out of this thing because I want to be able to get you guys in a close-up shot once we get the timing cover off. So a couple of hose clamps and this radiator will come right out. So as you guys can tell, the motor's really starting to look pretty bare under there. We're really getting down to where we need to be. So just about everything's out of the way. Now it's going to be water pump, crank pulley, tensioner yet, valve covers. There is our crankshaft position sensor, mounted right on the side of our engine block. Alright, as you guys can see, we've taken a lot of stuff off so far. Say hi, Jordy. Alright. So, at this point, guys, it looks like my memory card is getting full for the camera. These memory cards hold roughly an hour of footage. So what this is telling me is, last night, when we started the teardown, to now, we are roughly 2 hours into this job. Okay, that's without the diag. So diag and so far removal, we are 3 hours total into the job, into a job that's going to pay, you know, an hour for diag plus over 10 hours for labor for doing the timing chain job. So looks like we're making decent time so far. Like I said, about 2 hours in. At this point, it's going to be time for a quick little break, dump the files on the computer, and we'll get back after it. And before long, we're going to have this front cover off here, and we're going to be able to take a peek at our chains. All right, I'll be right back. And we're back. So we're going to continue ripping off the driver's side valve cover. So as you can see, as we're getting this entire motor apart, it's starting to look a lot smaller and smaller, which is pretty amazing considering how big this thing looks when you pop the hood. But all right, so here's our cam phaser and outer timing chain. This is our main chain on bank 2. And here's our inner chain. So our intake cam here is actually spinning our exhaust cam on this one, okay? And then same thing over here on bank 1. We have our bank 1 phaser, outer chain, and our inner chain. And these inner chains do also have some tensioners in there to maintain them, but that's interesting. Quite a bit of slop in this side for the inner chain. Let's see what this one's like. I'm not seeing the same over here. This side looks a lot better. So, do we have maybe an issue with our tensioner over here on this side? I don't like that. It's a lot of slop. All right, and then the valve train looks pretty good on here. Not really seeing anything that's going to have to be addressed. And our spark plug holes were also looking pretty good, and those gaskets will get replaced anyway. Now, according to the Toyota service info, we can check the timing on this motor with the valve covers off and the crank pulley still on. So why don't we give that a shot? Looks like it's going to be a 22 millimeter down there on the crank pulley. Grab our breaker bar. Now, guys, it's important that we only go the direction of the engine here, okay? We're only spinning this thing the direction that the engine spins, all right? So we're only going clockwise, all right? Anything going the other way could cause problems on a good engine. Only spin your engine the direction that it is intended. All right, so let's spin it over. We are still spinning against compression because I still do have the spark plugs in. As you guys can maybe hear that noise. Now I'm looking for, I have a mark on the pulley here, but I'm not exactly sure where it's supposed to line up yet. So let's grab some service information and find out if we can see where this thing's supposed to be lined up. All right, so we're going to get the timing set up. According to this, our mark on our crank pulley is supposed to be at the 0 degree point, and I'm going to get this all lined up and then I'll show you guys. All right, that looks perfect down there on the crank. So I'm going to leave the crankshaft alone because we're thinking that our cam timing is off. I want the crankshaft to be on its perfect positioning. And by looking at this, it's looking like we are ever so slightly off. Let's take a peek again at the graph. What do we got here? And I would say that we are pretty darn close here. And then our bank 2 cam looks pretty good. Now we get over to this one and we are off. And our exhaust cam is also off. Now this is interesting. On this cap right here, we have 2 marks. We have an indent mark and then a mark coming outwards. So I'm thinking that the inner sprocket lines up with one and this outer sprocket is supposed to line up with the other. But if I look at this, I'm saying that our line is almost directly in the middle. All right, so let's zoom this one in. See if we can't get a good shot of exactly what we're looking at here. All right, according to our installation procedure, our mark right here, a little arrow on the phaser right here, is supposed to be lined up with this indented mark right here. And if I had to guess, I would say we are roughly half of a tooth off. And again, that's just a rough idea, but I would say we're roughly half of a tooth off, which would make sense, right? We talked about our cam sprocket here having 36 teeth. So if it were to jump 1 full tooth, what would we see? We would see 10 degrees of camshaft angle. Now it's important to remember, camshaft angle is then doubled for crankshaft angle. So 1 tooth off up here, 20 degrees on crank angle. According to our lab scope images that we captured, we were not 20 degrees out on this bank 2 camshaft, right? Like I said, I thought we were about 8 or 9 degrees out in total, and this is kind of showing me exactly that. So there's our 1 mark. Ooh, that's a lot of paint. That's not a good mark. Try that again. And there's our other mark, so it's going to come across our chain like so, right in the middle of this link, okay? Right in the center of the link. And as you guys can tell, the center of the link is not centered with that. So we are definitely 100% out of time. You guys kind of have an angled shot. Let me grab you a direct shot overhead. Okay, so there's our marks. And looking directly overhead, you can see that we are not lined up where we're supposed to be. Okay, this cam timing is off roughly 1/2 of a tooth on the cam sprocket on bank 1. Okay, passenger side bank, bank 1. If we bump over to the driver's side bank, let's take a look at this one close up. Now, according to service information, this one is supposed to be lining up with this line right here, the first line. So if we look, that would be this part of the chain would come across. So I would say that we are very, very close to being in time. I would say that this side is in time. Okay, one other thing I want to show you is this cam sprocket over here has a little divot in it, right? And if you look at our raised edge up there. See if I can get the flashlight to stay in place. You can see our raised edge right here and our little divot down there. They're definitely out of time, right? So we're, what is that, maybe a quarter of a link out of time. It's not perfectly straight like it's supposed to be. Okay. All right. So we will verify this once more after we get the timing cover off, and we can actually look at the timing marks that are on the crank sprocket, because right now we're just judging it off of our harmonic balancer, which looks like this. Should get you guys a close-up of that, just to show that we are as you can see our little, oh, flashlight down, hold on. All right, so I think that is physical evidence, physical proof that this motor is out of time, which we already knew. I wasn't doubting. I don't know if you guys were, but I wasn't. I knew that this motor was out of time. Now we have physical proof, physical images, pictures, proving that this thing is completely out of time. So let's pull the front cover off and verify our timing once more on our crank sprocket behind the cover against our cams. All right, looks like our VVT solenoids are actually bolted into our front cover. So I'll actually pull them both out so you guys can see them. And that way we can also verify that they are not in any way contaminated, which I don't think they are. I mean, they both worked when we actuated them. So there's a VVT solenoid out of this Toyota motor. It's kind of hard to tell, but you can see it's pretty clean looking, no sign of really any sludging or anything like that. So I'm happy with that. These things look good. Pull out the bank 2. That one's a little stuck in there, a little bit of gentle persuasion. Get it unstuck. Try not to break anything here. Wow, that one is really stuck in there. Let's grab a pliers and see if we can spin it a little. There we go. Boy, this thing should not be coming out this hard. There. I envy all of you guys that aren't in the Rust Belt down south in Arizona or wherever. A little bit of corrosion on top of our O-ring here was keeping this one in. As you guys can see right here on top of our O-ring, there was some corrosion on our VVT. So I'm gonna leave these. I want to put these back in the same side that they came from. So I'm just gonna simply leave them up here on the cowl on their appropriate side. Alrighty. So those are out of the way. Looks like we got 2 more bolts here. Looks like our cam sensors are going to have to come out of the way in order to get these 2 bolts out. Oh, and just so you guys see this, this is the point that the cam is actually riding on. Let's zoom in here. All right, so you can see, let's grab the flashlight. You can see the tip of our cam sensor right here, right? Coming through the front cover. If I take this out. So our cam sensor right here is sitting in here, and we're reading on this wheel right here, okay? This wheel that's on the front part of our crank sprocket here is what is giving us our waveform, you know, our 0 to 5 volt waveform is being generated by that wheel, okay? Our Hall effect sensor is reading high and low. So as that wheel comes around, a high spot versus a low spot will go, 5 volts to 0 to 5 volts, that kind of thing. So that's how that's all working. It's reading off of this front trigger wheel on our sprocket, okay? All right, so it's definitely loose now. Now it's just a matter of getting it off, and there we go. All righty. There's our front cover, and we're leaking oil out of it because of we're making a mess. Good old remote mount oil filters. Right into our drain pan. All right, so let's take a look at what we got here. Looks pretty good. I don't see any issues inside of here really. We'll clean this up nice. Throw it in the parts washer, get it cleaned up. But this is our oil fill tube right here that goes up to our oil filter. So that's why we're draining so much oil out of this thing right now. I grab an absorbent mat here, and oh, maybe I'm not, can't reach it. All right. Let's see what we got. Motor looks pretty clean inside. I don't see anything broken. All right, let's bring you guys in, and I'll show you what we're working with. Okay. So, as you guys can tell, everything's looking pretty clean on the front of this motor. See if we can get the flashlight to stay put. So there's our single chain running around here, down on our crank sprocket at the bottom. hang on. Okay, so here's bank 1, bank 2, chain running around down on our crank sprocket down here, and well, there goes our light again. Like I talked about, this is our tension section here, 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 and over on this side. These points here, the chain is actually loose on here. As you can tell, I got some play when it's sitting on its gears like that, okay? So our tension spots are supposed to be in these sections, and that's where we're allowing for chain stretch, right? So like I talked about, our chain is going to stretch in this section here, which is going to slightly retard this timing, the cam timing on this bank. And then we're going to take that stretch and add in this stretch and this stretch, and that's going to set this cam even further off, just like we showed you guys just before. So that's why this single chain engine, and it's not truly a single chain engine, I understand that. We do have 2 tiny chains that are running our exhaust cams, but for all intents and purposes, this is a single chain timed engine between our crank and our cam sprockets, okay? And as you guys can see, it doesn't look like there's anything broken inside of here. But, like I showed you at the beginning of this whole ordeal, look at our tensioner. All right, now that we can actually see this thing up close and personal, with no mirror or anything like that, look at this thing. You guys can see, oops, camera's falling asleep. Okay, you guys can see on here that it does look like rings on a tree, right? So, oh. And now that is not just, boy, this has to be the worst spot to put a light. I keep bumping it off. I'm sorry, guys. This is not just dirt or grime that's on there. These are those rings that I was talking about. So now that we can see this thing up close and personal, it does look like over time this tensioner worked its way out slowly, okay? Which it seems exactly like a, trying to get you guys to get focused on this. Unfortunately, having, without the overhead jib camera, I can't get the camera far away enough to focus it completely. But here, let me grab a pick. So it looks to me like right about here is where it was extended out from the factory, right? Right about at this point right here. This all looks pretty uniform in here. And then we went to here, and then to here, and then to here, and then to here, and then it just kept going. Ever so slightly, continuously. And I will have some up-close pictures of this thing once we actually remove it out of the vehicle. But that's definitely showing me that it did not happen quickly like I had thought it did. You know, looking at it from the outside with a mirror, it was really hard to see that. Looking at it now up close and personal, it does look like this happened slowly over time. Our chain stretched itself out over time. We got more and more slack in between these links when they're tensioned, and that caused our tensioner then to what? It caused our tensioner to react. So our tensioner works its way out slowly, and then eventually, because of the chain stretch, our timing becomes out of spec. Our timing becomes over retarded, okay? So it looks like this is going to be a pretty simple job. As you can see, our oil pan is still on here on the bottom. We're going to clean all this up, get it nice and shiny clean on there when we put everything back together. Put a nice bead of silicone RTV sealer on there. And I think we should be good to go. So no steering removal, no differential removal, no oil pan removal. Pretty decent job here. All right, I'm gonna snap a bunch of pictures when I'm inside here, and then we'll work on getting these chains taken apart, okay? So let's take you guys back. Bear with me. Hopefully don't make you guys sick. Sometimes it's the downside to being the one-man band here, right? Got to get myself a cameraman. get myself cameraman Brian or whatever his name is out there on Eric the Car Guy. All right, so I think that's going to be about it for the moment. I'm not going to make you guys come back for another video. We will continue this removal of the chains, verifying timing and that kind of thing in a minute, but I want to get in here and I want to take some snapshots and some really up close, in-depth images for you guys that I can maybe have up on the screen at this point. All right, so according to my camera here, looks like we got about 8 minutes left to film out of an hour total, so that puts us at 2 hours and about 2 hours and 50 minutes or so to get to this point. So just under 3 hours of labor to get to the point where we're ready to pull our chains off. Doing pretty good. I would say that things are going well. So I would think an hour or so to pull the chains off, clean up everything, get our front cover clean and our valve covers clean, that kind of thing. And then it's another small amount of time to get our chains on and timed, and then everything goes back together the way it came apart. So, all right, be right back. All right, so getting right back into it. At this point, we know that our timing is lined up like it's supposed to be. We know the timing is off, yes, but our cams are sitting where they're supposed to, and our crank is at top dead center cylinder 1. So according to our service procedure at this point, it is time to remove our tensioner and start to remove the chain. So I'm just gonna pull the bolts and see what happens. Let's see if we can get this thing off of here. All right. No turning back now. Here's our chain. This is our timing chain for this 4-liter V6 motor. And I just so happen to have the new chain sitting right here. So let's do some comparison. Got a block of wood. Just put 2 screws in it just to hold the chains in place. And let us see if we don't have differing lengths. This is going to be hard to tell. All right, so if I hold it completely level, very difficult to tell. All right, so I'm going to take both chains off and I'm going to hold them against my fingers here. And pulling tension on them, I have quite a bit more slack in the old chain than I did in the new one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go and take this to work and actually have it measured and to find out exactly how much stretch that we encountered. But I'm going to call this, here, this is probably the best view I can give you guys. If we hold them right next to each other, and I'm just letting gravity do its job right now. They're just around my thumb up there. You can obviously tell that our old chain behind there is sticking out. I would call that maybe half of a link or so, right? Okay, so our old chain was just as we diagnosed, just as we predicted, just as we knew, is stretched. Alrighty, good stuff. So we knew this before even getting in here that we were expecting to see timing chain stretch on the old chain, but it's always nice to be able to actually see the difference and see how much just half of one of these links can cause problems inside of this engine. Set that off to the side. Alrighty. So as you can tell, the motor is now without its chain. All right, again, we have a little bit of wear on here. Don't really see anything significant. You can just see some discoloration in the middle there where the chain's been riding, but I don't see any sort of significant wear on our guide. I'm thinking that this chain just stretched over time, and that's, you know, what happened. That's just the way it went down. So this side's tensioner on this smaller chain doesn't seem to be working. And that we noticed that right away with the slop in this one as compared to this one. So at this point I think it's going to be figuring out how we take these off the cam here, and we'll dig right into it. All right, we got some flats on our camshaft. So it looks like what we'll be able to do is grab onto those and pull the bolts. Oh geez. And there goes our cam. Oh, it does not want to stay in place. So this is where it's supposed to be lined up. Okay, let's grab a, is that probably a 17? Okay, so we can pull this off now. And now I'm not worried about the timing on these cams right now because everything is keyed. So this can only go back together one way in one spot. As you guys can see inside of here, we have keyways for everything. So when this goes back together, it's only able to go back in one exact location. So now, once this is all said and done and time to go back on, it'll be just a real simple, only goes on in one place, so then we just need to determine which direction the cams need to go. Uh-oh, I think that landed down in our oil pan. That was part of our tensioner for that inner sprocket. Success! This little plastic piece could have caused some issues inside of our oil pan. This is the other half of the tensioner on that side. So we put it back together just to make sure that we have all of it. There we go. Perfect. And on that note, I think it's going to be about time to verify there's nothing else inside of this pan, and then it's time to put a rag over this thing. So it seems like this tensioner is actually stuck in place on the bottom. It doesn't seem like it's doing its job. It seems kind of locked in place. So it's a good thing we're doing this, taking this all apart, because chances are it could have led to failure in the future. Wow. I wonder if that's how it's supposed to be. I wonder if one side's supposed to be locked and the other is the pushing force. One pushes down, the other pushes up, maybe? Could be normal. Not gonna know until we get our new one and compare it against it. All right, so as you guys can tell, the entire front of the motor is apart. Why don't I bring you over and just show real quick that the entire front of the engine is apart, and we are now ready to clean, and then from there begin our reinstallation process. So both of our cam phasers and sprockets are off. And again, once we're in the reinstallation process, you can see that these are keyed. So our cams will end up back in the right spot where they belong. Just on a normal timing chain job, you might not need to do this every time. But on this one, we found that the tensioners were weak, and since we're already in there, might as well just take care of it. Do the customer right. Okay, so I think that's going to be about it for this moment. I'll be right back. Alrighty, so the motor's all cleaned up. It's time for this thing to start to go back together finally. So you guys can see all our gasket surfaces are pretty clean. It's time to put our cams on. Now I'm not going to go over everything on this entire reinstall process, but I'm going to go over the key points and factors that need to be addressed when this is going back together. So first point is our camshaft phasers, sprocket phasers, and sprockets. Okay, on the back side of our phaser here, each phaser is labeled with either 1 dot or 2 dots. Both phasers have it. When we're lining it up on our bank, the dots correspond to the bank, okay? So for bank 1, we're going to do all of our lining up with the single dot, and on bank 2, we're going to do all of our lining up with the double dots, okay? So keep that in mind. The phasers go on either side. The double dots are for bank 2, which makes sense, right? 2 dots, bank 2. So we're going to take our chain. We got a new small chain for between the intake and exhaust, and our new sprocket, and we're going to get this all put together. So with our chain, we have 2 black links, okay? You can see 2 black links on our chain, one right at the top and then one right here. We're going to line this up, and we want our black link to line up with our single dot on our sprocket, okay? I have the black link facing this way so that I can see it from the front. But basically what you want this to look like is when it's sitting on the engine, you want your single dot one to be lined up so that we can get it onto this sprocket. All right, so like this, you have this thing sitting on the motor, and then your other black link is going to line up with your mark on your exhaust cam sprocket, okay? So it'll look, when it's all said and done, something like, well, if I could get it to line up, there we go. It looks something like that, okay? So let's go over and get this thing put on. All right, so we line this guy up. That looks good, and we have new tensioners on both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to slide this over our cam. And this will only go on in one spot. Like so. And then let's grab our sprocket. And let's get this all lined up. So it looks like we're pretty far off on this cam. So I'm going to try and bring it closer. Because remember, our yellow mark right here at the top is where this thing lines up properly. So right about there. That looks pretty darn good. We'll see if it stays there because we're right at the sweet spot of the motor and it doesn't like to stay here. So hopefully this doesn't end up killing my fingers. Try and slide this in here. And right now we have a pin in the tensioner so that it can't move. Come on. There we go. Oh, we're one tooth off on our sprocket, on our exhaust sprocket. So let's get that moved over. Which seems to be easier said than done with the tensioner in here. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's see if we can get this lined up. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I'm just gonna run my bolts into the cams quick, and we'll take a peek at how this turned out. Okay, there we go. All right. So with this all lined up, what we should see is this. Tilt you guys down a little. Oh, too far. Whoa. Stick with me here. All right, so what we should see is this. We should see our cam, phaser, bank 1 line up with that yellow mark, which it looks pretty close. Looks like our cam just needs to be moved just a hair. Bump that just a bit this way. course, it doesn't want to fall into the sweet spot. Okay, so now this tooth is going to line up with our yellow spot right here, like it's supposed to, and then we have our black link lining up, centering on this extruding pin, and then our other black link back here, oh, right into the drain pan. Our other black link here is lining up with this extruding pin up here. Let me zoom you guys out just a hair. All right, so black link on our inner chain lining up with this extruding pin, black link on our inner chain on this one, and our phaser lining up with our indented mark here. So I think that's looking good. I think this side's good to go. Let's pull the pin on Mr. Tensioner and release our tension, and that side's done. All right, that's in place. See, we'll get our sprocket in here. There we go. Ooh, that side fit nice. That was all still lined up. All right. So now that cam's tightened down. Zoom you guys back out here so you can see what I'm doing. So let's take a look at how we fared here. So our black link, oh, it looks like we're just a little bit off in timing. Pull our cams down just a bit. Alrighty, that looks perfect. Pull our pin. Our tensioner is now exposed. Our chains are both tensioned. All right. Our cam phasers and inner sprockets, exhaust sprockets are both installed. Now it's time to get our guides in place and our new chain and tensioner put on. So I have all new guides for this thing. I got the two little plastic ones that go on either side here. So I believe these would be universal to either side. Seems to be the case. But just to verify, let's compare against the other one that was on this side. Yep, looks good. So there's those two guides. Now we got two other ones here. So this is our bottom guide. This is what our tensioner is going to push against once our tensioner's on. And then we got this one here, which is a bolt-on guide. Looks like we're going to test my memory a bit to see if we remember where this goes. Looks to be right about here. Oh. Oh, what the heck am I doing here? Alright, let's get our tensioner lined up. So that's how it's all going to sit. Alright, so Mr. Pin is still in our timing chain tensioner. Once you pull Mr. Pin, Mr. Tensioner is no longer your friend. So we're going to leave Mr. Pin in there until we have our timing set, until our chain is on and ready to go. So let's grab the new chain, and I'm assuming we're going to see some black links on this chain as well. And sure enough, there's two black links right there, and there's probably a third right down there. So I'm thinking we're going to set two of these up on top of our cams and then one down on the crankshaft. So I'm going to start up here because it seems easy. So get this in on our cam where it belongs, hopefully. All right. Oh, make sure we're not a tooth off. There we go. Down around our idler sprocket. And then up to our okay, so that's not the way these black lines line up. I was thinking that the shortest two distances were between the two cams, but it's looking more like the short distances between the crankshaft and the bank 2 cam. So let's try this. Let's give this a shot. Okay, like so, like so. All right, I'm still not lining up black marks. Aha, success. Success will be had. Judging by the slack in the chain right here, we got to get our cams just adjusted a little bit. Try and make this happy, because we're a tooth off on this side right now. There we go. So what I'm doing right now is I'm moving the cam just a little bit so that I can get the slack out of the chain in this section, so there's not as much slack. So that way we can fit this down and around the crankshaft. And hopefully, oh, here, our sprocket on the crankshaft has this is where our timing line is with our keyway. There is actually a small dot right here. I think you guys can maybe see that. There's a small dot right here. That's where our black line is going to line up, or our black link on our chain is going to line up with that small dot. And that's going to tell me that everything is happy inside of this engine. So let's back this cam up here. Try and get this on. Does not look like it wants to go on. So let's try it this way. Alright, we do not have enough slack in this chain to get it installed right now. So something's going to have to come back off most likely here. Oh, maybe not. So that came off, went on nice. So we're close. Let's pull this guy off. Okay, so this is the easiest side to pull. Let's get that off and get our chain on. Alright, looks like I need a little bit of slack. So I must have a little slack somewhere in here. There we go. So just freeing that little bit up right there was enough. Alright, so let's just get this set back where it belongs. Get our timing back where it belongs. Alright, nice and snug in between there. And make sure our black link is on down there. We should be able to put this guy on now. Hopefully we'll be able to get this guy put on. We might have to pull our tensioner back off, and it's looking like that's going to be the case, because there's just not enough give here. All right, that's fine. Takes 2 seconds. So this is all stuff that you learn when you've done it 10 times. Note to self, don't put tensioner on until chain is lined up. Sometimes you can squeeze them in. This one, not the case, which is a good thing. It means our chain is going to be kept nice and snug. Now we should be able to we got a lot of slack over on this side. So right now our engine is very much slacked on this side, which means that we are ever so slightly off with something. Which means I think we're going to be able to go like this. There we go, we'll get that pulled tight. Make sure our black link is still where it belongs. Ooh. All right, so I pulled the motor a little bit, so now we're nice and snug through here. All we did was bring all of our slack over to this point. So our black link is still lined up on our mark, our black link is still lined up on our mark, and our black link is still lined up on our mark where it belongs. And now, bring up our guide. Our tensioner should fit right in place. Look at that. Okay. All right, so our tensioner's tightened down. Our motor is now in time like it's supposed to be. So at this point, we'll be ready to pull the pin on our tensioner, which is going to take all the slack out of this side, and we should be able to spin this motor over twice clockwise, and we should still be in time. Now, in all likelihood, our black lines are not going to line up again unless we were to pull this motor back apart. The black lines are only an installation lineup, and that's why our gold links on our old chain weren't lined up where they're supposed to be. Somewhere in this revolution, whether it's 5 times, 10 times, 20 times, 60 times, whatever it is, at some point spinning this motor over, the black links will line back up, but it'll take some time. I once did a 2.5 liter Ford motor in a Mercury Cougar that I want to say it was like 27 times of turning the motor over. I finally got the colored links to line back up. But it doesn't really make that much of a difference because we have our timing marks, which we were lining up with before. So we line up our link to this one, our link to this one, and our crankshaft mark down there, and we'll be good to go. So currently, as this thing's sitting, it is slightly backed off, and it looks like, yep, that's the case for the entire motor. So right now we are spun just slightly backwards. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring everything, I'm going to put the crank pulley bolt in, and I'm going to bring everything forward just a hair to bring everything back in line. Missing a socket. All right, so now, as you guys can see, our cam mark right here is lined up right where it's supposed to be. But when I look down at our crankshaft, we are a tooth off on this thing. So right now we're pointing up to here, and yeah, we're definitely a tooth off on our crank. So that means it's time for our chain to come back off and get this guy in time like it's supposed to be. So tensioner comes back off. And this is why we check before we go pulling the pin. All right. So let's look down here. All right, so you guys can see that black link. This right here is our black link, and right next to it, without a doubt, and I'll point to it with this little pin right here. Right next to our black link sits this black link, sits our little mark on our sprocket. So our black link is on our sprocket where it belongs. our black link is on our sprocket like it belongs, and our black link is on our sprocket like it belongs, right? So if we look at our other spots, let's take a peek. Oh, you guys are way out of focus. All right, so, oh, sorry. There's our black link right there on the sprocket where it belongs. And let's take a peek at the other side. Sorry, guys. And here's our black link on this one where it belongs. So all of our black links on our chain are lining up as they're supposed to be. But I don't like the way this thing is lining up down on the crankshaft, where it lines up against our engine block. It looks to me like it is off. So at this point, it's going to take a little bit more digging into figuring out where exactly the timing marks are going to line up down on our crank to make sure that this thing is 100% perfect before we pull the pin on our tensioner and release tension on this thing and go with that. So, all right, time to figure out exactly how this works. All right, so we're back at it today. As you guys can see in the pictures here, we were definitely off one tooth down on the crank pulley. Call it a long day, maybe just being a little bit tired. Sometimes when things aren't working right, things don't seem right, you just gotta kind of just walk away and come back to it later or the next day or whatever it may be. So let's go ahead and get this corrected where it needs to be. And then from there, it should just be a simple get this thing back together. So let's just grab any slack that might be in our chain. Make sure we're still lined up, looks good. And time to install our tensioner again and see what happens here. All right, so I'll torque the tensioner down in just a little bit. But now what I want to do is I want to verify all of my marks, make sure everything is still where it's supposed to be. That link down there looks lined up, that looks good. Our bank 1 cam looks good. Bank 2 cam looks good. All right, now it's time to pull the pin on the tensioner. And let's see what happens. Oh. All right, so the pin is pulled. And I think it actually, part of the plastic broke off in there. So now our chain is under proper tension. Now it's time to spin this motor over twice and verify that we are still in time. All right, so there's one revolution. That tape holds almost too well on the lower intake manifold. All right, we're coming up on our timing marks. I'm going to watch as this one comes up here. Right about there. That looks good. See how this side looks? That looks good. Let's look down at the crank. Boy, that's hard to tell. chain's nice and snug. So all right, I'll snap some pictures of this so you guys can see it, and then we're good to go. Then we'll start the reinstallation process. All right. Okay, so as you guys can see, bank 1 cam is lined up, bank 2 cam is lined up, and our crankshaft pulley is lined up right where it's supposed to be. Everything on this motor is good to go. Now if you wanted to, you could spin this thing over another 2 times and check it again. But at this point, I'm ready to start the reinstallation process. Now, I'm not going to make you guys sit through the entire reinstallation process as well. I'm going to get this thing put back together, and tomorrow night, we'll be back in the Wells Tech garage, and we're going to be verifying this, hooking cam and crank sensor scope patterns up again, and making sure that this engine looks like it's in time, and verifying that our check engine light goes out and passes the test for the P0016. So this thing is going to have to idle for a little while and run the test. All right, so tomorrow night we're going to do our verification. Tonight I am going to get this thing put back together. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you.